All right, cool. We're live. So give it about 3 minutes or so from now, and then we should have most of our viewers trickled in.
Okay. Can you see my deck there?
Yeah, and I think if you put it in presentation mode, it'll show like full screen.
Yeah, if I put it in presentation mode, now I can't see the of the Hangout, so I'm not sure what's better to do. But
sure. So I think there's a way like you can zoom in, so it'll be like larger though. Possibly. Link.
I seem to have lost the ability to share my document. Hold on. Oh. Yeah. I'm trying to now. I don't see my PowerPoint popping up as an option.
Oh, it won't let you share the screen now?
No.
Interesting. So if you click on this kind of like screen, and then it should pop up on the left, I hope.
Yeah, no, I see the screen share button, but then when it asks me what to share, I'm not seeing like some of my other windows, but I don't see my deck.
Oh, there it is.
You see it?
Oh, wait, no, that's the... It looks like it's either doing Chrome or your full screen.
Oh. Huh, what's the fix here? Oh, there it is. Yeah. Now do you see it?
It looks like it is a black screen. Oh, there it goes. Yep.
Okay. So I think what I'll do is just go full screen with this and talk through it, and then as I'm wrapping up, I can switch back into the Hangout to see the questions, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, so I'll actually, as the questions come in, hopefully through our hashtag, I'll just verbally kind of go over those for you.
Okay.
All right, folks, so give us about another minute, and we will start with our presentation.
And that is how you support our so you don't have to worry about animating here. Yeah. So just once you get that set it up and then start
Awesome.
and then, yeah,
That's right. Thank you.
Okay, folks, I think we are just at about our starting time. So let's get rolling. Steve, are you ready to go?
I am. Thank you very much.
Perfect. So just to do a little quick intro, I'm Elliot, the president and co-founder of Digital District, and today we have a great presentation from the SVP of Search and Social at Rep Equity. Steve, feel free to kick off, and for those of you who have questions as we go through this, feel free to use the hashtag DDSEO or use the Google Hangouts on Air tool as well. After his presentation, we'll start going through those questions. Steve, off to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Elliot. Thanks for the opportunity today in the Digital District for setting up this webinar. As Elliot mentioned, my name is Steve Wanzik. I'm the Senior Vice President of Search and Social Media at a company called Rep Equity based in DC. And wanted to thank you all. I know that I'm competing against the Pope today, so thank you all for joining during your lunch break, or perhaps you're all working from home as I am. We're doing a little telecommuting today, as our office is actually right next to the church where the Pope is at this moment. So if you hear some screaming in the background, that is probably my 3-month-old son. So we're going to try to hope he stays on his best behavior today as we move through this. Structurally, we're calling the presentation SEO 101. One of the hurdles with a webinar like this is you never know the level of knowledge that folks may have going in. So what we've tried to do is structure with a handful of slides that are really quite basic, moving into some more intermediate level stuff, and then closing out with what might be called graduate level SEO. So trying to make it accessible for everyone and valuable for everyone. So one more note, as Elliot said, we're obviously taking questions, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can towards the end of our time. What I'll also do, though, is grab all of them as we wrap this up and try to work them all one by one, and we're going to put that up as part of a blog on Digital District either later today or sometime tomorrow. So we will answer everyone's questions submitted either through Hangout or I think there was the option to hit me up on Twitter. So let's get started. As I said, we're sort of starting very basic as you could get, with a simple statement that I'm sure is intuitive to everyone, but search is important, right? I mean, I think we all know the value of being on page one of Google or Yahoo or Bing. For the purposes of this discussion today, I will probably wind up using Google as sort of a catch-all. Couple reasons for that, and in our industry, of course, we look at Google as having such an overwhelming market share. It's about 65 to 70% of users in this country, and it's even higher internationally, up over 90% in most countries around the world, with the exception of those that sort of have their own search engine like China and Russia. But so, that's why we focus on Google. Its algorithm is also a lot more complex than the Yahoo Bing algorithm. It's important to note that they actually share the same technology. It's Microsoft's technology that drives search results on both Yahoo and Bing. So you'll see things looking remarkably similar on both of those platforms. So that's just a little overview of why you'll hear me say Google and use it kind of generically. I think we've all come to do that as a society. But it's obviously very important to be on page one. That's very critical real estate. And so while that is obviously intuitive, we find that sharing some of these stats can be kind of impactful. It's actually to the point where 92% of users don't go beyond that page one. 70% of your clicks are going to come from the top 5 spots. So it's sort of even more crucial than that. In terms of worrying about where you rank and getting your visibility as close to top half, we refer to that as above the fold usually of the page as is possible. The last 2 bullet points on this slide speak to the fact that search is really evolved into so much more than a marketing or a sales channel, a way to drive traffic. It's also a way to shape your message and shape your image and sort of define your brand online. The third point here I've always found fascinating, which is that 90% of users trust the organic search results.
Hey, Steve.
What's that?
Hey, sorry to interrupt. It looks like the screen share is kind of like frozen on the first intro slide.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to kick off screen share and then put it back on, it should hopefully reboot it.
Okay.
There it goes. Yeah, so it just went to where it needs to go.
I can full screen it again. Are we looking good?
Yeah. So it's on the right side now. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you for jumping in. So we can all now see the stats that I'm reciting. The first 2 there are covered. The third one, that 90% of users trust the organic search results, and that's really interesting to think about. That sort of as humans over the last 100 to 150 years, we've become conditioned to picking up the front page of a newspaper and assuming that what's there is true or as close to the truth as journalists can come. Um, and so we're sort of conditioned to believe the same about Google. Well, there's no real editorial process driving what you see on Google. So it's important to kind of remember that the degree of trust people place in these results is a huge opportunity. And so as long as you're doing the right things in terms of SEO, you can really kind of achieve that level of comfort with your audience. The last point here that we find interesting as well is that 49% of a company's brand value is tied to the reputation of its CEO or its leadership team. And so it's another thing to think beyond using search as just a traffic funnel. A lot of companies, you might have a website and don't think much more about the rest of your online presence. We'll switch to the next page here, and Elliot, can you confirm that worked?
So it looks like it's still on the previous slide.
Okay.
There it goes.
I guess I'll do that next time. So slide 4 here, as I was saying, sort of the segue here is that we use search as more of a brand management platform in this day and age. I personally have been in the industry for about 12 or 13 years, and things have changed dramatically in that time period. And that's going to be one of the themes of our presentation here today is how the algorithm has changed and how the search landscape has changed. At the most basic level, the way search results are displayed has changed a lot as well. And so, back in the day, the previous company that I worked at, we had a website, and we worried about driving sales through that website. What we didn't worry too much about was the rest of page one. This is about 10 years ago. So that allowed, the handful of upset customers, even though we had millions of satisfied customers, anyone with a blog, because we weren't being proactive about it, to pop in there as the number 3, number 4 result, and really have a significant negative impact on your brand. We solved that issue at this previous company by basically creating a lot of positive content and starting to look at Google page one as the primary place where people are initially interacting with our brand. So what we see here today is the way that that results page has evolved over time, and there are a lot more opportunities to do that these days. So you can see sort of how I've laid out here. You certainly want your flagship website to be at the very top. You want to make sure that you've got a good title tag and description tag, and we'll get into those a little bit later as we move through the presentation. Site links we've all seen. You may not be familiar with the term, but that's sort of what we call those secondary links that pop up and make your flagship site really kind of take over the first half of Google page one. We're also seeing over there to the right, a couple years ago, Google really started building up what it calls its knowledge graph. And so that's where you'll see those little boxes off to the right. They're not ads. They're not organic results. It's just Google itself trying to answer your question, essentially. So you'll see it very often appear above the organic results for things that are more queries in nature, where Google will just attempt to answer your question right there without even driving you any deeper to another site. It pulls a lot of its info from Wikipedia, from Google Plus pages that businesses set up, and we'll speak to that a little later as well. And then further on down, you see a lot more diversified content on page one now than you used to. So there are opportunities to be in the news, to press releases, and any media coverage sort of sits there and it's in the news box. It's important to try to utilize that. And then the ideal page one profile for any company or any brand is to round that out with some social media. And so, if you have an active social media account and presence, you can do a pretty good job controlling page one and in that way influencing the way that people are experiencing it. Moving on to slide 5. That worked, I think.
That works.
This is where we break down the elements of SEO, sort of how we categorize the different tactics that go into doing a good job on SEO. They fall into these three categories of on-page, off-page, and then analysis that sort of binds it all together. So your on-page tactics are what people who have a decent understanding of SEO are definitely going to be familiar with. It's considering keywords, meta tags, which include that title tag that I pointed out on the previous slide. That's the clickable link that you'll see on a page of Google results. It's also the title that appears in your browser tab. That has become one of, if not the single most important signal that we can send to Google when defining what a page is about. And so that in that sense, it's an opportunity to rank for any given topic. There are other kinds of meta tags that you find deeper in the page, meta descriptions, and on, and we have a slide later on that sort of gets into all of that. Your internal link architecture is something to look at. That is how your pages on your site are interacting with each other, making sure that it flows in a good, natural, user-friendly way. We want to make sure that we properly use images and then tag those images. In this era of kind of moving towards mobile devices and interacting with websites that way, you want images that are going to load relatively quickly. There are also opportunities to slap a meta tag on those images. It's another way to again, send a signal to Google that this is what my page is about. And then loading time. So these are all things that we test in our SEO audits. And I've got a slide later on that really gets into the nitty gritty of that. So we'll return to this topic as we move. The off-page side of things is what people probably think of as link building. And that's still very much part of it, right? I mean, we like to say that Google was kind of the original social media network because it looks at inbound links as basically likes, thumbs ups. It's other websites vouching for you as a good source of information. So that was the very first iteration of Google's algorithm was really entirely based on how many links does this particular piece of content have pointing to it. That has evolved, and there are things to consider with inbound links that we'll discuss as we move through. But from a sort of broader perspective, the industry has evolved, almost flipped back into more of a traditional PR function when it comes to link building. It's about building relationships and earned media and creating content that people will link to organically. This is all in reaction to some of the algorithm updates that we'll discuss here in a couple of slides. And then the analysis piece is what brings it all together. You're always going to need to do a great job understanding what keywords are driving your audience, finding out where the opportunities are. A lot of times we'll look at keywords. Our clients will come to us with keywords that they think the audience is going to be searching for, but what we do is you really want to get in the head of the audience. You want to throw away any of your preconceptions and do the research through some of Google's tools. You determine not only search volume but also how competitive a keyword is, and so you want to find that sweet spot of a keyword that has a meaningful amount of traffic that is also perhaps not quite as competitive as another one. So there are always opportunities there that a good set of analysis can point out. So I spoke a little bit about how Google's algorithm has evolved over time, and it is constantly evolving. The results you see today are not going to remain the same tomorrow, and there are lots of reasons for that. Obviously, it's the internet, and so new content gets generated daily. Third-party content can encroach upon what you're doing. Social media activity drives things, but really the most important piece is Google's own algorithm updates. And so the graph that we pulled here is from Moz, which is one of the most widely respected industry tools and I have a slide on that later as well, where we'll list some of what those tools are. But for the purposes of this slide, it's just a good way to measure how variable the algorithm is on a daily basis, how much volatility we see. And so it can be useful if you notice traffic falling off, or maybe a ranking that you had, you were doing well for a certain keyword, and suddenly you've dropped off page one. We can look back and see how volatile the Google algorithm was on a given day or across the course of a month. And that might align with the traffic patterns you're seeing, and that helps identify what it was that might have caused the issue. And again, this slide is just another example of why it's critical to stay on top of SEO on a go-forward basis. So here are some of the fun little cartoon characters that Google has named some of its major algorithm updates after over the last few years now. In 2010, so we're talking 5 years ago, Google representatives testified before Congress that they made 536 updates to their algorithm that year alone. And that was 2010. So, you know, we can safely estimate that that number is at least that high, if not significantly higher these days. One of the, perhaps a more interesting thing that came out of that congressional hearing is that in rolling out 536 updates, they tested 13,000. So that's the level of activity that's going on a daily basis as Google really tries to refine their algorithm. And these are some of the big ones that they give names to. You may have heard. If not, it's kind of a useful exercise in walking through how we understand what Google's goals are, because a lot of the SEO industry, you know, can sometimes be about gaming the system, and that is not at all the right approach. You don't want to wind up doing that, because then you're always playing catch up. What's important to do is really try to figure out how to stay ahead of Google's mission, and that is providing a good user experience for real people. And so what some of these algorithm updates have done over the years, starting with Panda in 2011, that was a refinement to begin penalizing low quality content. So you may see or be familiar with sites that basically just sort of scrape content from other sources for the sole purpose of trying to get a ranking in search engines. And sort of it's traffic arbitrage. They then run ads, and you know, there's no real depth to the content on those kinds of sites. And so that was what Panda was rolled out to address. We've definitely seen the impact of that. In 2012, Penguin came along, and that was an attempt to crack down on link schemes. So that's where you'll have these big sort of link networks or link wheels, where again, the content there just doesn't have much depth. There is nothing useful for a real user. It's cramming a lot of links into one page. In many cases, they had no relevance to each other, and so Penguin was Google's way of attempting to crack down on that. It was also the beginning of Google actually proactively sending out link warnings, which are accessible through Google Webmaster Tools. Again, we'll speak to that in a bit. But there is now a way to basically disavow links that are pointing to your website that you think are spammy, or you suspect might be harming you in some way. In 2013, we saw the release of Hummingbird. That was basically an update to the core algorithm, so it didn't have a specific mission like the previous two. Really, what people have speculated it came down to is improving Google's ability to deliver semantic search results, meaning understanding the intent of what someone is looking for when they type in a query. So it made it much less keyword dependent and kind of more topic dependent, providing answers instead of just matching keywords. And so that goes into the knowledge graph that I mentioned earlier. It's Google pulling together answers of its own to display for folks. In 2014, we saw Pigeon. That That one was very targeted at local results. They improved their ability to factor in things like distance and location when um, when a local search is conducted. That also made it easier for them to identify a local search. So, if you type in a town or a zip code or something like that, Google sort of runs that through, at this point, almost a separate algorithm. It's huge for local businesses. And then finally, this year, they apparently ran out of cute animals, although I guess you could argue that they ran out of cute animals in 2014 with Pigeon. But we may have all heard of Mobilegeddon, which hit back in April of this year. It was one of the very rare instances of Google actually announcing an algo update beforehand. So it sort of gave folks a chance to prepare for it. The reason being that, again, as we move towards more mobile consumption of content, a very important factor in Google's algorithm now is how mobile friendly your site is. So that can be a very important driver for a lot of businesses. Not looking at something that is mobile friendly either by having a dedicated mobile site or by having a responsive website that allows for the same experience across any device. You need to be moving in that direction. The mobile piece of this is huge this year. So here are some of the things that all that means as we evolve, and we're 2/3 of the way through 2015 here. I kind of alluded to keyword matching, seeding and importance, and it's more about topic association now. That means you're not necessarily going to get an exact keyword match. You're going to get what Google thinks you're looking for and what that topic is. The reason for that is that domain reputation is actually more important now than page relevance. So that means things like seeding really well-known authoritative sites like CNET, if you're looking for something technology related, or maybe the Huffington Post, the New York Times, the Washington Post. Depending on the kind of query, you're going to get a site that sort of dominates its industry. That's very important to consider when thinking about, what your link outreach opportunities might be. Leverage some of those legacy type sites that have that kind of power. Exact match domains are far less successful. So, if you wanted to try to zero in on a very specific niche market, maybe even to the town or to the neighborhood, it used to be that you could have a domain called DuPontCirclePizza.com, and anyone searching for pizza in DuPont Circle, you might perform very well for those searches and be the #1 result. That is no longer the case. That's an example of, I think, a kind of gaming system. So we've all seen those sorts of domains. It's obvious why they're there. And so that plays into the previous point where the domain's wider reputation, authority, and strength are more powerful now. It really means your brand drives your results, and you need to be a leader in your space. Some of the things you can do to achieve that: you want to group your keywords together to build that topic relevance. So it's no longer about really honing in on a set of 100 keywords and trying to make sure that each page has 3 instances of pizza or pizzeria. You're doing it more semantically again, so using natural language and creating authority around the topic. You also want to make sure that you're being unique. This is increasingly important and sort of falls into the category of quote unquote quality content. Google's looking at basically your value add. What are you adding to the user experience? And while we say be unique, that doesn't mean you can't look for examples of people who are doing it really well and draw inspiration. But you do want to think through your own sort of spin on the topic at hand. And then you want to make sure you're building your brand relationships because it's the ecosystem idea of search engines as a social network. The more websites in your industry or on your topic, or websites that are viewed by Google as a great destination for a wider audience, those sorts of places are where you want to be being referred. So we'll take a look at some of the tools now, moving from beginner into intermediate. Google's own ecosystem is very important to leverage here. So, Google Analytics, I think, is pretty well known. That's how you can get a good sense of what you're using your website. Google Webmaster Tools is probably not quite as well known. We often find that people have neglected to set that up or link it to their network. And that's increasingly probably the most important way to manage your search presence in your SEO campaign. There are a lot of interesting tools within Webmaster Tools that give you insight into keywords, but also that's where you'll see those warnings that I mentioned earlier of Google sort of saying, hey, we see some links pointing to your website. Would you like to disavow them? So it's important to log into Webmaster Tools and keep an eye on that from time to time. And then Google My Business, which is sort of the latest version of Google Places, and it's kind of an amalgamation of Google Places and Google Plus if you've established a business. That's critical for local. That's a way to basically tie your website and your brand to a physical location. So again, it goes back to that attention algorithm update. And then next slide here, because it's the same topic. This is sort of what you get from those three tools. So on the upper left there, that's analytics. And again, that's more about traffic, user flow, user acquisition. It used to be a very good way to look at the keywords people were using to arrive on your site. A few years ago, that changed. And so now, if you're in Google Analytics, you may see not provided as a keyword category. As many as 90% of your inbound visitors from organic search might be listed as not provided. That was Google's way of establishing some privacy, basically in the wake of Edward Snowden and other privacy concerns. They want people to think that if we're logged into a Gmail or any sort of Google account, that our usage is not being so that's why you no longer see that stuff in Google Analytics. You'll see a very small sample of what keywords people are using. But again, it goes over to Webmaster Tools, which is the little graph there on the top right. And I know the graphs themselves aren't particularly useful because they're small. But despite that crackdown on keywords and analytics, you can still get, it's anonymized, so it's not at the user level, but you can still get those keywords in Webmaster Tools, which is another reason why we say it's really important to make sure you've got that set up correctly. There is no such thing as not provided in Webmaster Tools for whatever reason. The privacy concern went out the door. But it's a great way to see which pages are doing well for you in search, what keywords you're ranking for. You can even see the average position of your domain for a given keyword over the course of a month. There's some really great stuff that's available in Webmaster Tools, and they continue to roll out more. You can see how often Google's spiders, which is sort of our term for the algorithm itself, or the robots that crawl your site. You can see how often Google is visiting your site, and you can see how many pages of your site Google is aware of, how many have been indexed in the search results. So that's a very, very important piece there. And then on the bottom, I just grabbed a screenshot of what a Google My Business page can look like. And so really the three of these together are about analyzing, optimizing, and engaging. You can see that the Google My Business allows you to collate reviews and respond to those reviews. You can encourage folks to upload photos, provide contact information, and sort of another thing that feeds that knowledge graph that we mentioned earlier. The final piece of the Google ecosystem that I think is worth mentioning, even though this is an SEO discussion, is Google AdWords. Now, it obviously all depends on budget and what your goals are, but a common misconception, I think, is that you might wind up cannibalizing some of your traffic. You're running paid ads on the same keywords that you're hoping to rank for organically. What we found industry research indicates is that 89% of PPC clicks are actually incremental and above any of those SEO organic clicks. So we always recommend doing both if you're a small to mid-sized business, national, global business, for some of the reasons listed here on the right. So, AdWords allows you to target your audience segments, customize landing pages, and produce experiences and messaging based on those audience segments. You always have a great degree of control over your budget. And then perhaps most importantly, it's another great way to get keyword data that is now no longer available in Google Analytics. If you have an active Google AdWords account, you can see things like conversion rate based on that keyword. And so it's a way to, again, kind of apply some priorities to your keyword strategy. If you know that a given keyword is converting 10%, by converting, I mean down to the level of a sale or an action. We're going beyond just simple traffic. We're saying this type of traffic led to the action that we're hoping for, and that's the kind of thing you can track in Google AdWords. So even if your budget isn't huge, just having an account will give you access to that information. So again, it's a pretty good holistic addition to any organic search effort. So here's some of the tools that I wanted to share as we move into the slightly more advanced portion of the presentation. I think it's very useful to gain some familiarity with these if you're the one on the ground actually doing the SEO. Moz, I mentioned earlier, is kind of the industry standard, the gold standard. Has a lot of great tools that allow you to dig into your website metrics. Things like domain authority and page authority, which are key components of the Google algorithm. It's also a great way to measure keyword difficulty and competitiveness, and it's just a great aggregator of news throughout the industry. Authority Labs is one that we use to track positions. Ahrefs is a good way to look at the backlinks that you're getting and sort of track those over time. Screaming Frog is a peculiarly named tool that is a good way to do site audits, meaning that it crawls every page on your website and returns any errors or any observations that could be optimized for SEO. SEMrush kind of leans towards the paid search side of things, but it's a good way, again, to get some competitor research, find out what keywords people are bidding on, because that's intel when you're deciding what to get involved on. And then Search Engine Land is an excellent source for industry news. They put out a daily newsletter, essentially, of headlines from the search engine. This slide is one of our favorites. I grabbed this from Search Engine Land, actually, and there's a lot of information here, and I'm noticing that we're running a little over, actually, already, so I apologize for that. But I provided the link there at the bottom, and I think everyone should have access to that. If not, we'll definitely include it in some of the follow-up materials. But this is an excellent one-page summary of the most important factors that go into Google's algorithm. So you can see divided there by content, architecture, and HTML, meaning your code base. That's the on-page SEO side of things. And then off-page SEO, including trust, links, personal, and social. The personal piece is interesting. That is adding another layer to our work, but we're seeing increasingly personalized search results, either down to the device, certainly by region and geography. So those are things to consider. again, this slide is probably way too dense to get into with any great detail at this point, given that we are running a little long, but it's an excellent resource, so I wanted to tack it on here towards the end. I'm happy to answer any questions as a follow-up that could come of this slide in particular. And then finally, wanted to run down some of the things that we look at when we conduct an SEO site audit. And this is something that the tool I mentioned on the previous slide, Screaming Frog, is great on. This is sort of your checklist. And so you want to put this together, make sure that you're getting everything out of the park when it comes to your on-page SEO elements. I'll run through kind of the top level categories here and then we'll look at some questions. Indexing means you want to make sure that Google has crawled all of your pages. You want to have a good sitemap in place there. Make sure that none of your content is kind of unintentionally sealed. So that's one of the first good steps to site audit. Accessibility is something that can sometimes get overlooked, I think, when you think about SEO, but it's site speed, load times, it's some more technical pieces like your server response codes. So that means our URLs delivering a 404 or 500. This is where we look at redirects. And again, we're kind of getting into the weeds here, but 301 redirect versus 302 redirect. Those distinctions can be kind of important. We look at site architecture, which I alluded to earlier. That means how your own website is set up and how it interacts with itself. How do you navigate within your website? You want to have a nice, clear hierarchy of your URLs and sort of your top. The on-page metadata there, we covered a little bit, but your title tag, your description tag, the little sort of blurb that gets pulled out and displayed right there in the search results underneath the title. So it's a great way, in addition to trying to optimize the content, it's sort of your chance to appeal to people who are glancing at it and deciding on what to click on from a Google search result page. And then page tags, meaning kind of the headers of your page. So this is all sort of getting into HTML stuff. I'd be happy to follow up on later. Content is huge, right? You want to have a content strategy, and one of the things that a site audit should do is look at if you have any content, how your pagination is set up, meaning do you have appropriate URLs and page titles if you're in a news section where you want to say click more. But lots of times those kinds of archives can get lost where they could be very useful content for you building up your site profile. Want to make sure you have no broken links on your site, and that means externally. So if you're linking to some other site that maybe has gone offline, that link is now broken, and Google doesn't like to see that. So it's important to kind of give your own property a good once over once in a while to make sure that your links you're linking to the right active places. Doing keyword research is part of any good site audit, and then rounding it out, that mobile-friendly test. There are tools out there now where it'll sort of say, okay, the user experience and the load time and the content organization is all appropriate for a mobile device. So that's what we've added now to our site audits going forward. I think that's it for the prepared material. I do apologize. I had no idea that I was going to go 5 minutes or so. But thank you for letting me drone on, Elliot.
Yeah, so we've got a little bit of time for some questions, so I'll probably just go for a couple of them. And then honestly, if people just want to keep asking questions using the DDSEO hashtag, we'll probably address most of those through the blog, just so we don't lock up too much time. But
we'll get to everything with the blog post for sure.
Perfect. So, one of the biggest questions that I hear pretty much on all sides of the spectrum is how long does it typically take to see results from SEO work?
Yep, great question. There are probably a few ways to answer it. I think the first thing to understand is that it is heavily dependent on the keywords that we're talking about. If it's a well-established keyword and it's going to be very competitive, an SEO campaign can take months, and that's one of the most important things that we need to do to set expectations when we at Rep Equity are launching a new client program. We're talking 3 to 4 months to have a lasting impact. Now, there are certainly other keywords that aren't quite that tough, and we can do that in maybe weeks. It's a rare instance where we're talking days, and that's primarily because a certain part of this is out of our control, right? I mean, Google only crawls and reviews the content online, on its own schedule, basically. Now, there are things you can do to speed that up, but ultimately, if we've made some changes, if we've built some links, if we've tweaked content, there is a bit of a waiting game for Google to notice it. And you never know how much your competitors may be doing during that same time point. So I think the way that we normally answer that question is it requires some patience and then an investment in organic search, while it can require months and sort of an ongoing effort. In the end, it's usually going to be deliver better ROI than paid. Paid, you can get that up and have it ranking within a day, but over time, the cost of an SEO program is going to come in and be more affordable for you.
So one other question, typically when you think SEO, people think businesses, but in reality, personal branding is a pretty big thing. What are some methods that just any individual can kind of boost their presence through some typical SEO tactics?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's probably something that I can follow up with more detail in the blog post, because I want to make sure I point to some resources and some examples. But it's in many ways it's the same as a company doing branding. So it goes back to one of those early slides I had where we looked at what the search results page itself looks like. Having a Google Plus profile is important, and I don't know how many people are on that platform these days, but it's one way to impact what is being displayed there off page one. Depending on your industry and your technical acumen, having your own personal website is certainly a good idea. That's one of the things we do very often when we're working with individuals who are branding themselves at sort of a higher level. I think the easiest thing to do, and this is where I can follow up with a pretty good list of these opportunities, is grab your name on every single social media platform that's out there. And so, obviously, we all, I'm sure, are on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, but there are a lot of sort of, second tier platforms that are out there where just locking down an account, you wind up having then a profile page. And some of these networks are stronger than others. And so we've noticed that some of them wind up leading to page one results. And so it's a good way. So if you've done all those things, you can wind up with, your stevewanzik.com, your Twitter handle, your Facebook page, your LinkedIn, maybe some pictures that you can even try to insert in there through Google Plus, and then some of these lower second tier sites. So that's a good way to sort of go about it on a personal level, I think.
So yeah, I think it's a fantastic answer, and we really appreciate your presentation and expertise on the matter. So I think, considering we're inching close to 1 o'clock,
I apologize for that.
yeah, no, so that's totally fine.
I thought I had like 15 minutes of material.
Yeah, definitely. So if folks still have questions, I think if they just use the hashtag DDSEO, we'll compile those and give those to you. So we'll add that in the follow-up piece. And then we'll also have a recording from this included down there as well. But otherwise, where can folks follow you and Rep Equity and kind of learn more about what you all are doing?
Sure, yeah. So our corporate site is repequity.com, and we've got all the appropriate social media. My Twitter handle is sdwanzik, WANCZYK. Probably easier to follow that in print. Um, and yeah, I'm also, people can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm everywhere that you'd expect me to be. So I look forward to interacting with anyone else who has questions, and we'll definitely compile the list of things that came in and add some details in a blog post.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you so much.
So,
Thank you.
All right, folks, that's it for today. We will see you probably next month. All right, have a good one.